Imagine you're having a conversation with a member of your family who speaks Spanish, or maybe a Spanish speaking friend, and you want to share with them your upcoming weekend plans with confidence. What do you say to them? How do you explain what you're going to do? Stay tuned because after today's episode, you'll be able to talk about your future plans naturally en español. Welcome to Spanglish Friends, the podcast for true beginner Spanish learners.
Hola amigos, I'm Val, your experienced Spanish teacher and co-host from Venezuela.
And I'm Em, your Australian co-host who's been learning Spanish for 10 years.
We'll help you get confident listening and speaking beginner Spanish with content you can actually use in real-life conversations.
Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on socials at Spanglish_friends. Let's get started.
Comencemos. Bienvenidos de nuevo, amigos, a un nuevo episodio de Spanglish Friend.
Yes, welcome back to a brand new episode of your favorite beginner's Spanish podcast. We are at episode 32, episode 32, and today we're continuing with something we started back in episode 31, which is how to use the structure of ir a plus verbo to talk about future plans en español.
Exactamente. Entonces, by the end of today's episode, you'll be saying, I'm going to in Spanish, plus be able to add temporal markers, words that describe when you are going to do something, such as mañana, tomorrow, esta noche, tonight, este fin de semana, this weekend, helping to make your sentences sound supernatural.
And como siempre, like always, we have 3 guiding preguntas to lead our learning. Starting with pregunta número 1. ¿Cómo pregunto a una persona cuáles son sus planes en español? Meaning, how can I ask someone what their plans are, their future plans are, in Spanish? Pregunta número 2. ¿Cómo puedo usar ir más verbo en conversaciones prácticas cuando hago planes? How can I use the structure of going to plus a verb in practical examples for making plans? And finally, pregunta número 3. ¿Qué marcadores temporales puedo añadir? What temporal markers, those words that describe when you're going to do something, can you add to your sentences in Spanish to make them more complete and natural sounding?
Como siempre, to help you bring everything we are going to learn today to life, let's first have our conversación pequeña, our mini conversation.
Sí, Val. And the key as always, friends, is to listen out for at least 3 words you already know so you can start proving to yourself that, yes, you are actually advancing your Spanish listening skills week on week. Then we're going to break everything down, all the theory you need to know afterwards to make sure you've understood this conversation end to end.
Setting the scenes for today's conversation, Em and I are going to have a chat about our weekend plans. Pay attention to the temporal markers like mañana or esta noche for making plans that we use. Mi amiga Emmy, are you ready?
Por supuesto, Val, sí. Comencemos.
Hola, Em. ¿Qué vas a hacer este fin de semana?
Voy a ir a un concierto el sábado por la noche.
Genial, me encantan los conciertos.
¿Y tú, Val? ¿Qué planes tienes?
El sábado voy a visitar a mis abuelos en la mañana.
¡Qué lindo! El domingo voy a estudiar español en la mañana y después voy a comer con mis padres.
Muy bien, yo voy a descansar el domingo y en la tarde voy a salir con mis amigas.
¿A dónde vas a ir?
Probablemente a un café.
Awesome, Spanglish friends. This mini conversation had examples of not only great verbs to use when making future plans, but also great temporal markers, those words that help us to describe when we are going to do something in the future.
Let's answer our questions from today's episode with pregunta número 1. ¿Cómo pregunto a una persona cuáles son sus planes en español? How can I ask someone what their plans are in Spanish?
Muy fácil, amigos. Super easy, Spanglish friends. In Spanish, There are two common ways you can ask someone, which include ¿Qué vas a hacer este fin de semana? We covered this phrase last week. What are you going to do this weekend? ¿Qué vas a hacer este fin de semana? But an alternative way you could ask someone what their future plans are includes ¿Qué planes tienes? What plans do you have? Tienes comes from the verb tener, which is to have, conjugated with the you form, tienes. ¿Qué planes tienes?
Both are supernatural. You can also just hear the time frame using both sentences. I'm going to give you an example. ¿Qué vas a hacer mañana? What are you going to do tomorrow? I've added the word mañana at the end of ¿Qué vas a hacer? To be more specific. If you want to know what the person is going to do tomorrow, you could also ask ¿Qué planes tienes esta noche? What plans do you have tonight? Again, I added esta noche, tonight, at the end of the sentence to be more specific.
These are excellent conversation starter questions to use with friends, family, co-workers, or anyone you're chatting with in beginner Spanish.
Moving to our second question. ¿Cómo puedo usar ir más verbo en conversaciones prácticas cuando hago planes? How can I use going to plus a verb in practical examples for making plans?
So you can use this structure, Spanglish friends, talking about anything you're planning in the near future. For example, voy a cocinar con mis amigos esta noche. I'm going to cook with my friends tonight. Another example, ella va a estudiar para el examen mañana. She is going to study tomorrow. You could also frame it as a question. Are you going to go out? ¿Vas a salir este fin de semana? This weekend? See, I'm using my tone and inflection to make it a question.
Yes, can you see? This is super useful.
Nice. Now moving to our final question, pregunta número 3. What temporal markers can you add? These are words which help to indicate when you are going to do something specifically in the future.
We have 6 very common ones you can start using. We've got mañana, which means tomorrow, esta noche, which means tonight, luego, which means later, pronto, which means soon, esta semana, meaning this week, and finally, este fin de semana, meaning this weekend. So in summary, we've got mañana, esta noche, luego, pronto, esta semana, and este fin de semana.
Nice. Let's combine these temporal phrases to make some natural sounding replies in Spanish. For example, voy a correr mañana. I'm going to run tomorrow. Another example, él va a viajar pronto. Can you guess what this means? He is going to travel. Él va a viajar pronto. Soon. I wish this was me. Amigos, we've covered the top questions now to ask someone about their future plans. We've put into practice that new structure of ir a más verbo, and we've shown you how to add even more details by adding temporal markers. So, Val, let's break down our mini conversation we had line by line. So, Spanglish friends, you can say with 100% confidence that, yeah, you completely understood everything we discussed in our little conversation today.
Vamos allá. First, I started asking ¿Qué vas a hacer este fin de semana? What are you going to do this weekend? Remember, vas a hacer comes from tú vas a hacer, you are going to do este fin de semana, this weekend.
Nice. And I replied with voy a ir, I am going to go to, voy a ir a un concierto el sábado por la noche. I said what I'm going to, un concierto, and then I gave that temporal marker, sábado por la noche. Can you guess what this means? El sábado, Saturday, and por la noche, night. I'm going to a concert on Saturday night.
And I responded saying, genial, great, me encantan los conciertos. I love concerts. Me encantan means I love, which we learned in our episode 26 about likes and dislikes in Spanish.
Good call out, Val. Then I asked Val in return, ¿Y tú, Val? And you? ¿Qué planes tienes? Using that new phrase we learned today. ¿Qué planes tienes? What plans do you have?
I responded with, el sábado voy a visitar a mis abuelos en la mañana. So breaking the sentence down. El sábado, on Saturday. Voy a visitar. I'm going to visit a mis abuelos, my grandparents, en la mañana, in the morning. Notice how I wanted to be very specific. El sábado, en la mañana, Saturday morning.
Nice. And I replied with el domingo, which is Sunday, voy a estudiar español en la mañana. I got really specific too, saying I'm going to study Spanish. Voy a estudiar español en la mañana, in the morning on Sunday. Then I added y después, which means and afterwards. I kept on going with my explanation of my future plans. Voy a comer con mis padres. Afterwards, I'm going to eat. Voy a comer con mis padres, with my parents.
I also wanted to share my plans for Sunday by saying, yo voy a descansar el domingo. I'm going to rest, descansar, el domingo on Sunday. Then I said, en la tarde voy a salir con mis amigas. In the afternoon, en la tarde, voy a salir, I'm going out, with mis amigas, my friends.
And I was curious. I said, ooh, Val, ¿a dónde vas a ir? ¿A dónde means where? Vas a ir. Where are you going to go? ¿A dónde vas a ir?
Which I responded with, probablemente a un café. Probablemente, probably, a un café, to a café.
Amazing, amigos. You've done it. You've expanded your knowledge of how to ask people about their future plans in Espanol. But you know what's also cool? Shouting out our Spanglish friends who have participated in our reto of the week, our challenge of the week, and commenting on our socials. So this week's shout out goes to our amigo Danny, who commented on our episode 30 post on Instagram saying he loved my Spanglish fails stories, including my story about azulejos. Now, if you haven't listened to that story, highly recommend you go back and listen to episode 30 because it is a real laugh.
I agree with you, Danny. The azulejos were my favorite part too. And amigos, if you want to shout out, get involved in today's reto. And today's challenge, our reto of today, is write one sentence telling us a bit about your future plans this weekend, answering the question, ¿Qué vas a hacer este fin de semana? What are you going to do this weekend? Using the structure we've learned today, ir a más verbo and one temporal marker.
For example, voy a ver una película mañana. I'm going to watch, voy a ver una película, a movie, mañana. That temporal marker which tells us when in the future we're doing something. Mañana, tomorrow.
Post it in the comments and we'll be checking them out during the week.
Yes, we will. Okay, Val, let's quickly recap the 3 things that you learnt today, Spanglish friends, right? Your 3 big takeaways. Grab a pen, grab a piece of paper to write this down and cement these learnings in your mind.
Vamos. Número 1. You learned today how to ask someone about their plans with questions including ¿Qué vas a hacer este fin de semana? What are you going to do this weekend? Or an alternative way, ¿Qué planes tienes? What plans do you have? Número 2. You practiced how to answer using ir a plus verbo. Going to in Spanish, for example, voy a cocinar, vas a estudiar, ella va a descansar. Número 3. You learned how to add temporal markers like mañana, tomorrow, esta noche, tonight, pronto, soon, este fin de semana, this weekend, to make your sentences clear and natural.
Now you can start describing your weekend plans in Spanish with confidence. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Muy bien. Little by little, Spanglish friends, your Spanish is growing. Quick spoiler alert. Next week, in episode 33, nuestro episodio 33, we'll be diving into how to say the members of your family in Spanish, such as mom, dad, sister, brother, and much more.
Nice. We've touched on a few of these today, so it will be great to bring it all to life next week and cement your understanding of these fundamental words in Spanish. Okay, amigos, esto es todo por hoy. That's all for today. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast.
As we said before, amigos, your support means the world to us. So, muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much and te veo pronto. I'm going to see you soon.
Ciao, Spanglish friends. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to Spanglish Friends. We are both so proud of the time you're investing to level up your Spanish skills.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, follow us, leave a rating, or tell a friend about the show. It helps our awesome community grow.
Join fellow beginner Spanish learners by following us on Instagram and TikTok at Spanglish_friends.
Congratulations on taking another step in your Spanish learning journey.
Hasta la próxima, amigos.